For
listener, and a heartfelt and humble welcome to episode 5 of Betrayed by Dice, the tabletop wargaming podcast that's never late, nor is it early. We arrive precisely when we mean to. My name's Lee Burns, and I'm delighted to be joined again by your co-host, Daryl T. Stoker. Daryl, how's things? How's it going?
Yeah, not bad, thanks. Decent week at work, and managed to fight off that bug that I was struggling with over the weekend, which we were meant to be recording this episode, weren't we?
We were.
But I was a bit under the weather, so not bad at all. How about you?
Yeah, fine. Like you say, we're recording this midweek, which feels a bit,
It's weird, isn't
out of kilter for our usual thing. But it's fine. Just quickly do kids' bedtime and zoom up here and start talking about wargaming.
Yeah,
that's a good thing to be doing.
The important things in life.
In truth, this is reaching your ears, listener, or your eyes later than we'd planned, as life, illness, and other realities of this corporeal plane prevented us from being in the same room as each other with microphones until now. But here we are. I think we're ready.
We are, definitely. It's definitely overdue.
Brilliant. All right, so get the admin out of the way first, just to let you know that we're coming at you on various exciting digital platforms, so both on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. Just search for Betrayed by Dice, or alternatively on YouTube at youtube.com/Northern Realms. I just realised when I was writing this that I should have probably been saying all this time that people should like, share, subscribe,
do all of the things,
and leave comments, and haven't sort of mentioned that. So at the end of this, or right now, just go ahead and just maybe leave 5 comments on this video
just this one,
to make up,
and never again,
and just comment away whenever we say anything that you think. Just do a comment,
and we're responsive. I think we've responded to every comment that we've had so far, haven't we?
Well, yes, some of the listeners have been taking it upon themselves to leave comments without even being asked, which I think just goes to show a real level of dedication to the cause, doesn't it? That's fantastic. We've also got an Instagram account. That's instagram.com Betrayed by Dice, where we'll be putting some pictures up of what we talk about.
Indeed.
And you can be the first person ever that isn't spam to email us if you want to at betrayedbydice@gmail.com. I'm not sure why
I'm asking for it now.
Well, that's going to fall off at some point, isn't it? But anyway, so what are we talking about today, Daryl? What's going on the podcast?
So today, as we always do, we will talk about hobby progress and plans, including updates from the worlds of Blackstone Fortress from yourself, 40k, some custom designed Conquest trophies that I've done, and some Kingdom Death Monster.
Sounds really cool. We've got recent games played, comme d'habitude, and also an exciting twist, some games that weren't played. But there's some stuff I wanted to talk about games that get planned and then don't actually happen. So we've got games from Warhammer Quest, 40k, Gloomhaven, your Conquest tournament, which I'm interested to hear about, and some different flavors of Star Wars, I think, as well.
Yeah, definitely. Main topic this week is full GW. We're hitting all of the clickbait vectors this month, aren't we? So a bit of a wide-angle lens look at what their dominant position in the hobby looks like and what it means for people like us, and indeed the listeners or watchers, and who... so for anyone really into tabletop games, because they're a fairly prominent feature in the world of tabletop hobby, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. They're the big lads. So what does that mean for all of us?
Everyone.
And then finally, as is a time-honoured way of things, we'll be finishing with secondary objectives. So we'll pick out each something a bit tabletop adjacent or not tabletop related at all that we both want to talk about. That'll do it. Okay, so swinging straight into hobby progress and plans. What have we each been working on this month? And I'll pipe up first, shall I?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so so for me, all the painting I've been doing the last sort of like little while, and I think this generally goes for all the painting I do probably, or the thing that motivates me to do painting mostly is actually having games planned.
Yeah.
Deadlines, things coming up, a reason to pick up a paintbrush. So for me, that this month that's been a lot of Blackstone Fortress stuff. I've had Blackstone Fortress kicking around on the shelf for most of the time it was out. I think it came out like 2018 or something. So it's like 6 years ago. So, but finally got like plans to play a couple of games. So there's a couple of campaigns possibly starting at the club.
Yeah. Keen-eyed and eared listeners will remember that last episode featured your Secret Santa, didn't it? Or was that the episode before?
Ooh, that might have been 2 episodes ago. So I had painted a Secret Santa.
From Blackstone
exactly
Fortress.
Right. Exactly
for
right.
For that reason.
I've been painting up some of the bad guys, some of the hostiles as they are. So some Negavolt cultists, who are, I guess, a kind of dark mechanicum bunch of cybergoths, really, I think. So they're sort of like, they're running full pelt at you. With sort of like strange, dark mechanicum cattle prods, basically. But they were really fun to paint. So I actually used one of my ancient GW paints from back in the day. So it's Rotting Flesh. And weirdly, it covered like an absolute dream. It was like, some of them are, not much good for a lot, but some of them are absolutely fine. And it was great. That went down fine. And then some contrast paints, so Blood Angels Red and Snakebite Leather for the fabrics.
Both very good paints, yeah.
Yeah, I think with contrast paints, with the experience I've got, I kind of prefer the first wave that came out before. Yeah. I think they might have reformulated them to make them all kind of...
They changed the medium a little bit, didn't they? Yeah.
I think so. When they brought out this sort of second wave, I think they were possibly a bit different. But yeah, and then I used some white oil paint for the cattle prods to get a kind of plasma effect. And yeah, it's something I'm really enjoying using is white oil paint to make like an oil wash, basically. To go into recesses that you want to be brighter.
Yeah.
So I can imagine this being really useful if you're painting flame or something like that, where you actually want to, because usually where you put in white, it's on like the edges of things, highlights and whatever.
Yeah.
But in an instance
with an internal glow.
Exactly. If you're looking for an internal glow, you want to get the white where the thing's brightest, and that they've been really helping in this. And then a couple of the a couple of the goodies that you can... The protagonists of the picture. So that's UR25 and Dayek Grek, if I'm pronouncing that right. So the first is a Man of Iron, or an Imperial robot, because Men of Iron don't exist anymore. And that was great fun to paint as well. So I kind of followed the Peachy method to some extent from back when the game came out, and he still worked at Games Workshop. Which was mixing Nailac Oxide, which is a technical paint, but a lovely sort of shade of, verdigris light blue, with Larmium Medium, which kind of made it like a very, very pale blue, half wash, half paint, and kind of almost made a contrast paint out of it. That went over the whole thing. And then
I didn't know that's how you had done that, actually, because that's really interesting. Yeah, because it as a paint on its own, it's got almost a little bit of a powdery finish as well, hasn't it?
It does. It leaves a weird powdery sort of stain on things if you were to use it by itself. But yeah, like mixing it with medium made it more like a thick wash or a paint. But yeah, it absolutely sort of stabilized it. And then an all over oil wash of a mix of yellow ochre and burnt umber to give a kind of desaturated blue, but like being out in the sun kind of John Blanche kind of look was the idea. It was a rare example of, when you've got an idea in your head for painting something and it actually comes out.
Just bang out exactly how you wanted it.
Pretty much how you wanted to. So yeah, that was great. But something I'd learned in doing that, which was I'd sort of thought like, oil wash is fantastic. I'm going to make up like a sort of batch. And I don't know if you got any experience of this, or if it was the medium, the thinner that I was using, because I'm using a bog standard white spirit to thin it. But I've put a lid on it and I was gonna like use it the next day, and it started to sort of break down or like chunk up, like the actual oil, and sort of separated from the thinner.
You get like a gritty sort of stuff at the bottom.
Exactly.
And was it reconstitutable?
It didn't want to come back. It looked like it wanted to come back together, but when you put it on the model, it would then dry in that sort of separated kind of form. So yeah, I don't know. So I mean, oils are so cheap, so it's no big deal, but it doesn't seem like make up a fresh batch every time.
I wonder if it's because you use Winton oils as well, don't you?
Yes.
Which is, I have quite a lot of Winton oils, and
probably more at the budget-ish range.
Also, I think it's the type of oil medium that they use. They use quite heavy linseed, and I wonder if it's just the type of pigment and the type of binder that they use don't agree with that sort of long period of being mixed. Because I've noticed sometimes, even when I make it, because I use like those little metal dishes to make it, by the time I've got through a couple of models, I can start to see the little granulation. So whether or not that's I normally just give it a bit of a whip around in the pot, but I've never tried to make and store something like, you know, like your Tamiya panel liners or Mr. Hobby panel liners or whatever, which are essentially the same thing.
I mean, we need to speak to a chemist here, evidently.
We do.
But like, it's interesting because somebody in our club Discord for West Allotment Wildlands had asked, you know, could somebody make him some oil wash because he didn't have the stuff or didn't want to, and I'd kind of volunteered, but I wonder if the reason that you don't actually get like ready-to-made oil washes is because, you know, they're just not stable within the thinner. But anyway,
and you do get enamels, but that's a different type,
different medium or different thins differently, isn't it? So that was it for Blackstone Fortress. And other than that, I've been painting a bunch of Necrons. So I'm talking about games not played. I had a 40k game planned with my pal Ben, which didn't come off. But on the upside, it pushed me towards painting a bunch of Necrons again. It was only going to be a 1,000-point game. But it got me painting a couple of bits out of the Indomitus box, which were not much use at the time, but now are decent. So the Canoptic Reanimator and the Plasmancer, and also a bunch of Immortals, a squad of Immortals.
Saw those today, great.
So got all of those painted. My scheme for Necrons is pretty well worn in now. I know what I'm doing, and it's basically just like very rusty. So like spraying them with lead belcher. Hoying some texture on with some blum 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 blum.
Type extrusion.
That's the exact stuff. And then just absolutely lacing them with streaking grime, like aka interactive streaking grime. Pulling that off with some white spirits, a bit of a dry brush, and then just picking out the green glowy stuff.
It's a very striking, impactful scheme though.
Cheers.
I think the it is warm, but it's a bit alien looking green with that warm, old, decayed metal, which sort of has a semi-organic vibe by it being all dusty and sort of things. It's really, there's a lot of contrast, but still fits together without it being like you put that contrast in just to catch the eye, you know, because sometimes it's a bit gaudy, isn't it? It looks a bit, whereas these look like they've just got out of the ground because they've been powered up. It looks good. Cheers.
I enjoy sort of I think I've got a vague idea that like the higher up in the sort of social strata that the Necron is that I'm painting, the less streaking grime it gets. So it's like less, you know, like got less filth on it or whatever. So your warriors are completely manky, and your Canoptic Reanimator is completely manky. The Overlord is just sort of, you know, he's had time to sort of dust himself off properly.
Or he's had a sonic shower.
He's got people to do it for him. So but those are really fun to paint, and I think like I enjoy going back to them because it's really quick, it's easy, it's a little bit like painting terrain, you know. It's not like a stress, you're not having to think about what you're doing. It's just sort of muscle memory, but you get it done. So,
I think because I've got so much of one color as well, that it gets the one of the big parts of it out of the way quickly, doesn't it? And then you can just do the fancying up, which is nice.
Exactly right, exactly. And then other than that, I've painted up a Frostgrave Apprentice and a Void Warden for Gloomhaven. They were just like quick jobs. But basically it's been it's been Necrons and Blackstone Fortress for
Excellent.
me.
Yeah.
And loads of fun. Really enjoying the painting. I think I'm up to 43 models this year.
It's very
so
good.
says the spreadsheet, which, for me is loads. I'm counting terrain. I don't know. I've got like a sort of like vague like terrain to miniature sort of ratio. So like those castles from Warmaster, I'm counting each bit as a miniature.
Yeah,
It might be controversial.
I think that's reasonable. Yeah, I do think that's reasonable. Yeah.
And
I reckon you could probably do a Necron warrior in a similar-ish time, couldn't you, with your tried and tested method?
that was my thinking. And then plans for the future. I need to get back to Warmaster.
Yep.
So yeah, I've been doing these bits and bobs for games that were happening or games that have nearly happened. And yeah, it needs to go. I need to get back to painting tiny little 10mm guys, and that'll be my plans for the next bit. But what's been on your painting table, man?
Well, speaking of Warmaster, I've got a little bit of a sore backside because of that. So you'll notice that my monitor has changed. I got rid of my widescreen monitor, but as I was taking it off the mount, I dropped it onto the unit that I had finally finished. I think last episode I was talking about how I had repainted a unit about 3 times. I went on to repaint it another twice, finally got happy with it, and then dropped my monitor on it, obliterating them.
Monitor versus very small resin
miniatures didn't go very well, as you can imagine. So that really took the wind out of my sails in terms of painting Warmaster, so I didn't make very much progress with that at all.
Where's Warmaster for you then currently? Is it sort of like, down the list, or
no, I'm still very actively wanting to play the game. I think I've just had, like, I had managed to make a lot of plans for a month or 5 weeks in advance for games, and it's just been not Warmaster, it's been other stuff. So that's kind of maybe why it slipped under the radar a bit. But also haven't been painting loads. I've been doing some hobby adjacent stuff, but not necessarily painting miniatures loads. So as we'll have a little chat about, we talked about this tournament that I ran, Conquer the North, number 2. I decided to go whole hog. So my plan is I want to have a really bougie tournament scene here. I want people to know that if they're coming to a tournament that we host, that they're going to have good prize support, a really good day, and they're going to get a trophy that they can be proud of to take home. Don't want just a bit of etched glass like you get when you go to a GW tournament or whatever. I want something that people really will be proud of. So for my set of trophies for the event, I went and found some busts that I thought fit the scheme, 3D printed them, designed a trophy plinth, used CAD to design the plates for, first place, second place, best painted, all that kind of stuff. So I did a load of CAD design work. I did a load of...
What were you using for that?
Fusion 360.
Okay.
Yeah, it's sort of a bit abstract at first, but once you got to know how to use it, it's for simple stuff, it's easy. So yeah, lots and lots of 3D printing from that. And then
were these FDM or resin?
Both. So I used FDM for the plinth, and then the bust and the nameplates were in resin.
Right. Bougie indeed.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, they're sort of, they're probably about a foot high. One of them was about a foot high, the first place one, and the others were probably 10 inches or so. So
yeah, for anyone on YouTube, we'll get some pictures. You'll be able to see. Absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
And hats off for like.
I was proud of them. I was really proud of them.
Where did you find? Because, like you say, they were for anyone that knows Conquest and knows the factions. Then they were fairly instantly recognizable as to what faction they would be probably related to.
Yeah, exactly. So
where did you find?
And it was
STLs?
just luck. It was just luck. Yeah. So the STLs were from my mini factory, and I basically just searched for bust. And just went through and just sifted through probably about 20 pages of busts, trying to find the ones that I thought were exactly right. So I managed to get a very either 100 Kingdoms or Dweghomey looking big warrior guy with big, thick, heavy armor on, which were for first, second, and third place trophies. I got a cool undead Roman legionary, which is very much the Old Dominion.
Yeah.
For last place, for Wooden Spoon, I got a sort of a Greek goddess, which is very reminiscent of the city-states, for best sport. And the only one that was kind of a little bit out there was the best painted, which is one that I had already. But I wanted to find something that looked like it was about painting, and it wasn't just a generic fantasy sculpt. And it's a sculpt of like a druid or like a wizard or whatever, who's got this long staff in one arm, and he's got this small bird up into his hand, but it looks a lot like a miniature painter holding a miniature up to their face.
Fantastic,
to
yeah.
have a little look at it. So that's where it sort of went in. But then did the sort of, sprayed them black, and then did 2 or 3 layers of dry brushing on each to give them the gold, silver, bronze. Did platinum for the best sport, because to me, best sport's the best award
That's
you
the
can
one to
get.
go for.
Yeah.
Yep.
So that was pretty good. I'm currently working on, which we were chatting about earlier on, a bit of a commission for one of the members of our club. So doing a load of orcs, 3D printed orcs for him. Cracking on with some Army Painter Speed Paint 2.0 as sort of a speed painting technique over a dry brush, but I quite like dry brushing with warmer colours. I don't like, I think
the
sometimes
something different in grayscale.
I think with the grayscale sometimes it gets a little bit caricatured and cartoony, so I like to use like the Xandri Dust and Bleach Bone or whatever it's called, or Skeleton, Shabty Bone and Screaming Skull, just to give a little bit of warmth, so when you're looking at cloth and skin, it feels alive. It doesn't feel like it's coming off the page of a Marvel comic.
Yeah.
So that works for me. It's what I like. It's how I painted my Woodrune for
Are these still from black, so spray painting black?
Yep. Black. So actually what I would normally do is use Raven Black, which is a very dark grey, but there was none available at my FLGS, and there was black there, so I just gave it a go, and it's worked fine.
That's definitely something I want to get into with the old slap chopping.
Yeah,
some different colors. Like I think, like with depending on what what the sort of dominant color is that you're going to be using, to like work up from like a very dark brown, or even like a dark purple in some cases, especially if you're doing a lot of skin, like working up from a dark purple. There
was a video that I watched of someone that was doing it, and they were doing an Underworlds team. It was the Ogre Underworlds team, and they did it, and I think they did a blue triad or a pink triad or something like that as the underpainting, and then went over the top, and similar effects. It really changes the way it looks. It might have been Ninjon, but I can't remember. But yeah, definitely one to think about. But I just find, for me, the warmer colours do give it a little bit more plausibility. Whether that makes a difference when they're on a table 2 foot away or whatever, 3 foot away, I'm not sure. That and the only thing that I've really, as a passion project that I've been trying to do since the last episode is I've been painting some of my Kingdom Death Monster stuff, because I've been running that at the club for some of the folks there. And Kingdom Death Monster is a campaign style board game.
A legacy board game? Is it that, or
it's not legacy, because you don't
change.
No, you don't lose things. But instead of it being like a dungeon crawler where you've got a set campaign, it's kind of like an arena boss battle sort of thing. So you basically fight these things called quarry, and they're all of these really gruesome, horrific monsters. So the first one that you fight is the White Lion, which is the one that I've been painting. But it's like this enormous white lion that's just got this really weird, like oddly human looking hands, but with long claws, and everything. There's a lot of body horror in it. There's a lot of weird sort of phallic symbols, and like everything's fingers or eyes, or it's just really weird and body horror-esque, but it's in a very dark and grim and like very unforgiving. We had a game at the club not long ago, and all 4 of us got decapitated in the game. So it was.
Is that the standard way of dying, or is it
no?
In a great number of ways?
Yeah, there's many ways. So you've got hit locations: head, body, arms, legs, and waist. And then when you get a serious wound in that area, you have to roll a d10, and on a 1 to 3, something really bad happens. But all of us just happened to get serious wounds in the head, which led to being decapitated.
That's very sort of. At least you all had that shared experience of being decapitated.
Yeah, but the line itself is a lovely model.
How's the quality on these? Because I think I saw this when it first came out on Kickstarter. Want to say, and the miniatures looked extraordinary, and like you say, some really not the usual tropes, some really unusual, imaginative miniatures. So, like, what kind of quality of minis are we talking about?
So I think good quality, but I don't think they are as mold breaking as people maybe thought they were.
Okay.
I think a lot of the people that played the game were probably less miniature war gamers,
right,
and more board gamers that maybe played stuff like Massive Darkness or Zombicide or whatever, and they're used to these one piece, soft plastic.
Are they one piece miniatures?
No, it's full kits that you build.
Okay.
And it's quite interesting because when you fight these monsters, you get to harvest parts of them if you kill them, and then you can build armor sets using that. So you get some spare survivors. You get a few sprues with some spare survivors, and you get a couple of sprues with each monster with parts of the armor that you can build for them, so you can then
interesting modeling opportunities.
Yeah. So if if you build a fully kitted out white lion armor with a lion's eye circlet and this and that and blah blah blah, you can make the model, which is quite nice. But price wise, it's very bougie. It's a lot. I think the money that you spend on it is definitely a lot more than you get as physical product.
Okay.
But I think there's definitely a degree of sort of collectorness to it and things like that as well.
I got a bit of that sort of vibe off it as well. But like rules wise, fun. Fun. Pretty brutal. Incredibly.
Yeah. So it's very killy, and the monsters tend to be very hard to kill, and you tend to be very easy to kill. So there's a bit of teamwork, and so each time you hit a monster, you have to flip a hit location card. And sometimes it's just like in 40k or whatever, you hit them and then you have to wound them. If you can't wound them, often the monster has a response, so it'll turn around and give you a slap, or it'll maybe grab a hold of you and run away to the other side of the board to isolate you from your friends. And
if you're gonna hit wound,
it's quite often, quite often you need something like an 8, 9, or 10 on a D10, so it's not very easy.
All right.
But yeah, so that's my hobby progress.
What's coming up? What's the big plans for the next little while?
Just get this commission done, make another start on War Master, and I've got a few little things that I want to do. I want to finish my Kingdom Death stuff. I really, really want to paint a little bit of BattleTech, just a small amount of it. Ooh. I got some Dystopian Wars ships.
All right.
I'll give them a little bit of a paint because they look fun and
they look really cool, those ships.
Just easy as well. And that'll be quite a quick speed paint, but look nice on the table.
Fantastic. All right. Shall we plow on in to some games played?
Let's do it.
Well, you've been talking a bit there already, haven't you, about Kingdom Death? I'll take the baton and do a bit chat about Warhammer Quest. So up until the last few weeks, I never played any Warhammer Quest of any sort. Hero Quest doesn't count, I don't think. But had a demo from Paul at the club of Cursed City. And I'd also then separately to that played a first expedition of Blackstone Fortress. So yeah, it was really interesting to play both of these sort of side by side. So for anyone that doesn't know, basically they're dungeon crawler type games.
Yeah.
Cursed City was the most recent, and that was set in Age of Sigmar land. And Blackstone Fortress set in 40k universe. So yeah, interesting to play them side by side. Loads of similarities. So it's sort of the core mechanic really is you roll some dice at the start of a turn, and depending on the results of those dice, you can take various actions when it comes around to your turn.
Yeah.
And there's an initiative tracker, initiatives randomly drawn, but there's various ways of sort of interacting with that and doing shenanigans about that. And you've got to kill the baddies and find the treasure, basically, that kind of thing. But yeah, really interesting to compare them. So I guess Blackstone Fortress felt like it was maybe a bit more about exploration, so needing to find clues to then get to the inner chambers, and then there's a sort of once you've done all of them, there's like a final chamber, and there's an envelope in the box that you get to open then. And whereas Cursed City felt like it had, and this might be just the mission that we were doing or the the exploration that we were doing as a one-off, but it felt like it had a bit more narrative built into it. So there was I think at the end of every turn, there was a kind of choose your own adventure bit where you could do one thing or the other.
Oh, right, okay.
And it would have an impact there and then. Whereas Blackstone Fortress has something similar, but you just roll a dice and a thing happens. There's no sort of like real interaction with it.
So I think, because I've played one game of Cursed City as well, and that was very different to how we played it. So it might have just been the quest that you were doing, or mission, or whatever.
Okay, so what was the gist of the quest that you were doing?
So the gist was we essentially were exploring the ruins of this city, and we had to. So there was 4 areas where there was like an objective that we had to claim, and to finish the mission we had to kill a certain amount of like leader mobs,
right?
And the monsters in that game spawn, in that mission anyway, spawn in groups. So it would be like 1 dire bat and 3 normal bat swarms or whatever. So we had to tally up a certain amount of leaders, which meant that even if you just managed to get to the objectives really quickly, you couldn't actually escape and finish the mission until you had endured a certain amount of and obviously because it's all activated by a deck, it went from being like, oh, this seems really easy, to wow, a lot of stuff. Oh, just a bad draw has happened and we're getting swamped, and it felt very undead and zombies and skeletons and all that.
Yeah. Again, it's hard to tell from playing just one of each, and whether or not it's to do with the cards that you draw, or like whether there's a fundamental difference. But it felt like Cursed City was maybe a bit more of a sort of like a horde, a ravening hordes coming on you. You've got to slog your way through them. Yeah. Rather than, so in Blackstone Fortress, we had a whole load of cultists turn up just at the last minute. We rolled for like the board was flooded with cultists, and my mate Jamie, who was the robot UR25, had to spend all this dice on just like running away from these robots to get into the lift with us. We'd been there for like ages because
to get to the chopper.
Got to the chopper, got out of Dodge, and or got back to Precipice, as it's called. And it's quite cool because so you've got rules for whatever spaceship you turned up in, because we've all turned up looking for different truths out of this Blackstone Fortress, where we're looking for different things, all the different explorers. So whatever spaceship you turned up in gives you like a bonus during the game, like whether or not you can muck about with initiative track or something like that. And then also you effectively then you flip the spaceships over when you go back to the bar, or to Precipice as it's called. And then you can basically sort of like go shopping, and there's different things will turn up at the different. So I can go to like your spaceship and like, oh, have you got any of such and such a potion or whatever it is? So that was pretty cool. Yeah, I like games that aren't just like right, you finish the mission and then it feels like you step out, like it's almost like a Mega Drive game, Golden Axe or whatever. You finish one mission and then you literally just walk on to the next mission in exactly the same place, and it's like, okay, I'm on to the next mission. Yeah, it's nice having that little bit of downtime, which matters. You get to do a bit of shopping or a bit of leveling up or a bit of... Yeah, absolutely. And what was quite interesting as well was that so you can push your luck a bit. So you can, if you've taken a bit of a beating, you can be like, right, lads, back to Precipice, and then you get all your wounds back. You get rid of your grievous wounds, because the only way of getting rid of them is to go back to Precipice, back to base. Or you can be like, well, we've only got 2 clues. We really could do with getting another 2 more, because you've only got a max of 12 missions to do the whole thing.
Oh, right. Okay.
Because there's only 12 event cards, and once you run out of them, that's it. You've failed the whole thing. So So yeah, you sort of, I guess there's a risk reward of, do we like, press on further into the Blackstone Fortress, try and find more stuff. Something interesting, there's very little narrative built into it. It's not like any sort of story unfolds other than which you tell yourself just from the stuff that's happening.
So it's almost like a roguelike. You've got like you're running the same framework of a game, but each time you do it, it can be completely different because of the order that things happen and
pretty much
build and
and I mean, I don't know. I think I'm fine with that. Like, I'm comparing it now to something else that I've got a campaign going, which is Fantasy Flight's Journeys in Middle Earth.
Yes,
where the an app is the DM. And does a pretty good job of it as well, but like the story like really kind of unfolds. I mean, there's a lot of vague stuff going on, but like it is narrative. It is really narrative sort of based. But I'm fine with either really. I'm happy to have a story told, or just to have a few beers and try and hack down some traitor guardsmen with your pal, and something funny will happen at some point. Because dices do weird things, so
and if it's a setting that you like and it's a theme that you're into, sometimes you don't need to be led by the hand with this is exactly what's happening. Your head canon almost takes over a bit, doesn't it?
Definitely. So really enjoying. I think I'd probably swing more towards Blackstone Fortress, if for no other reason than there's a lot of expansions which actually were released for it, whereas Cursed City had a bit of a weird thing that happened with it. But that's another story. And then just to quickly swing into some games that I didn't play. Potential new segment idea here, because we can just talk about anything here. But these were both games that were meant to be getting played, didn't. 40k I've talked about, was meant to be playing my Necrons against my mate Ben's Chaos Space Marines, and had to cancel because of an unwell child. However, it just got me thinking, because I enjoyed writing a list. I enjoyed painting my miniatures to get back to fully painted for it. I enjoyed sort of like thinking about 10th and how it's different, because I've only had 2 games this edition to date. And it sort of reminded us of this bit in a Terry Pratchett novel where there's a character who only ever reads sheet music. They never actually listen to the music, because actually the act of listening to it spoils all the sort of like the preparation and the enjoyment. Or it's a bit like going on holiday, it's like it's the funnest bit, making like plans.
All the plans and the booking and the checking out the hotels.
And then you actually get there, you roll rubbish dice that you don't understand the terrain rules, and like the game's like, you're like,
it was so much better in my head.
Kinda. So I'm very much, the game's been rebooked. I'm looking forward to playing it. I'm looking forward to getting back into a bit of 40k and like figuring out how it works, or trying to. But just interesting to like have a game cancelled. But the lead up was enjoyable. And I guess it'll happen when it happens. And then the other thing that I wanted to mention in games not played is that so me and my partner went in and bought Jaws of a Lion, which is kind of a beginner version of Gloomhaven. I think it was probably last Christmas, and it's just been a situation where I'm wanting to play it, she's probably not wanting to play it, and it's not her thing. And at some point, and she's just like recently said, look, this is not my thing, and it's just not going to work out. And I was like, good, that's fine, because
now that you've said it,
that's great, because we've been having these games, we've got like 4 or 5 missions in where I'm doing all the setup and trying to read all the rules and trying to understand it. She's like, just tell me what to do. I'm like, okay, and why are you not invested in this at all? And like, and just it just kind of wasn't working. And it was kind of a relief just to admit that it wasn't working. And my partner Kasha, like we play a bunch of games, a lot of things like Wingspan, a lot of things like the one where you have a dual
a
Splendor, that kind of stuff. Fun board games with a bit going on, but like sort of like done, and you don't have to have a fetish for game mechanics. So Gloomhaven, Jaws of a Lion, it's pretty straightforward. You do one thing off one top of one card and one thing off the bottom of another card, but there's a lot of interactions between different things. There's a lot of ways of sort of shenanigansing it. and you kind of have to enjoy that, I think. And she just doesn't.
Yeah,
and it's
that's fine.
Totally fine.
Fine. Yeah. But it's good that it's like just now an open thing where she's like, I'm not into it, and then that means that you can just go, right, cool, I'm going to go and play the game.
I've got a copy of Jaws of a Lion if you're interested. But it's interesting. It got to a point where she died very early in one mission, and in the game, and then in real life went to do the dishes, whilst I sort of like struggled on against and like occasionally shouted through about like some, and I was just like, this is no good. So that was the.
It spoils it for both of them, doesn't it?
Yeah. So that's some games that I haven't played. Do you want to talk about some games that you either have or haven't played, Daryl?
Games that I have played. Been playing some Conquest. So Alex, our friend who moved down to Canterbury, came back for Conquer the North.
A real linchpin of the Conquest scene.
He is, he went on to take first as well, so definitely with my wise tutelage, of course. But so we managed to have a game on the Friday night before the tournament, which was on Saturday. So that was great to have a game with Alex again, because he's just my really good friend, and also like being my favourite sparring partner in Conquest. He's a really fast learner in terms of competitive play. He's very reflective about how he plays. So, we've definitely... when I play a game against him, it always feels like it's a game.
A good shared experience.
Whereas it's not always the case. So yes, did that. Played a bit of Star Wars Unlimited with Scott. That was fun. Played a game of Star Wars Shatterpoint with Scott as well. Also very good.
We've talked about Shatterpoint. What's Star Wars Unlimited?
Oh, it's cards.
Cards, yeah.
So it's Fantasy Flight's new card game.
Okay. So Fantasy Flight got all... Well, they haven't got... Because they don't do Shatterpoint, do they? So they haven't got all the Star Warsy stuff.
Yeah, so they don't have all of it. But so I think there's many folk with many fingers in Star Wars pies in terms of games.
Yeah.
Because Atomic Mass Games does Shatterpoint and Legions.
All right.
Legions is what it's called. Legion. Star Wars Legion. And Fantasy Flight did Armada, X-Wing, which have now sort of been binned off a bit. They're kind of there, but just really sort of grumbling on in the background. So yeah, Unlimited is really interesting game because there's no resources in terms of like, when you play something like Magic, you get lands, which are then your resource, and then you get to do stuff with your lands. Like when you've got a hand, you start the game and you have to choose two of your cards to then basically turn into resources. So you lose those two cards to play. And then every turn you get to draw some, and then you get to optionally add one to your resource pile, which you obviously want to do because you want to be able to play more stuff. So it's always a case of like, Sophie's choice, like, oh, I've got all these good cards, which one do I want to get rid of as a resource so that I can play the others? But then it has two, so I don't know if you've played any card games, but instead of it just being like this is my side of the battlefield and that's your side of the battlefield, you've got a leader and a base. Your base is like your health total or whatever, and your leader is like your ability. But then you've got ground units and space units, so you fight ground battles and space battles. So if somebody's got a really, really strong ground list, but then you've got a load of space stuff, you can get some damage through whilst you're trying to deal with that. It's not just whoever gets the best board state.
So there's a couple of different tracks to what's going on.
Exactly, yeah. So it's just like, like in any war game, there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Combined arms card game.
Yeah. That's exactly what it is. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So
cool.
It's got some interesting mechanics. So Scott thinks he's slick. He went to the pre-release down at Bay Games or FLGS. And he was like, oh, I'm going to go and get the starter set. Do you want us to grab you one, bro? And I was like, no, I've spent loads of money this month, blah, blah, blah. And I said, look, just grab us one, because I'll regret it if I don't get one. And he went, oh, it doesn't matter, I've bought you one, because he knows that if he buys us the starter set, it means that I'm going to end up buying a load more and I'll get invested, because it's exactly what happened with
every
Shatterpoint.
Other game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I've been playing a bit of that. That was really fun.
Cool.
Played some Infinity at the club with Alexander for the first time. His first time I played with Alexander, and they were a very fun opponent to play against. But also, first time I played Infinity for probably about 3 years, and Infinity used to be like my only game. I used to play it religiously.
Do I remember you saying that it was something you were into? You know,
Like competitive play and stuff. Yeah,
really into it.
I used to like going to like all the local tournaments and stuff. So I really enjoyed Infinity for a long time, and actually, it's not an easy system to play. There's a lot of sort of nuances to it that are very unique to Infinity, and they're not really like any other game. And it was a bit of a learning experience going back to it, trying to like, you know, claw some of those back from the depths of my memory. But it was really fun, and I did enjoy it.
That's really cool. Did you find the game where you'd left it, or has there been new additions?
No, yeah, it's a completely new edition, and there's a few things have changed. So like list building was really difficult but then some of the core concepts have changed in list building. So like I used to try and always get maximum activations by putting in some cheap, we used to call them cheerleaders.
Yeah.
But they've just limited that now because you can only have 15 models maximum now.
Okay.
So, you know, you used to get 20, so they've just reduced it by 5. So mids and things have got more expensive, and they've made a lot of the rules a lot easier because just I suppose like, you know, 10th with a simplified, not simple, they've unnested a lot of rules because there used to be rules like camouflage, but then TO camo, something sort of total optical camouflage or something like that. And one would give you -3 to hit, and the other one would give you -6 to hit.
Okay.
But now it's just called -6 to hit, camouflage -6 to hit. So they've just denested all of the rules, and they've made it part of the initial profile that you look at. That's good.
I get mixed up between Infinity and Malifaux, so
Very different.
Yeah.
In fact, that box that's just behind my chair there, I've bought another a Malifaux, because Malifaux is what I went on to from Infinity.
right. Which is the one with the deck of cards activation?
Malifaux.
That's Malifaux. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's Infinity's sort of secret sauce, or the thing that makes it different than other games?
So in Infinity, you have an army which generates an amount of orders. So essentially, each model that you take lets you have an order, and then that order can basically be spent on anyone in your army. So you can essentially activate one model 15 times if you want.
Okay.
But every time you activate that model, if it does something within line of sight of an enemy, that enemy gets to react.
Right.
If they do it within line of sight of multiple enemies, all of those enemies get to react. So if you walk out in the middle of the street and there's 4 snipers looking at you, all 4 snipers get to take a shot at you.
That's really cool and sounds very interactive.
It's very interactive.
Yeah.
It's never not your turn in Infinity. It's never ever not your turn. But it makes, I think it's very, very thinky because of that, because you're like, is there a safe way that I can get this? So we were playing.
I feel like analysis paralysis, like, is
big. It is big, and I'm normally fairly fast with what I do in games. But even I was like, Alexander, you've knackered us yet. I literally cannot think of what the best thing to do is to. So essentially, he was playing this faction called the JSA, which are the Japanese secessionist army. And I'm not going to get into the lore. We'll do it in another episode. But they're essentially like a rebel state, or they've been emancipated from this tyrannical rule. And they've got a very heavy Japanese influence in terms of they've got like samurai, like their models are like, they look like samurai. They've got big wide based brimmed hats and samurai swords and cool stuff like that. There's lots of anime references in Infinity as well. There's a really heavy anime and gaming references, but also I had this giant mech robot which pretty much everyone can get, but there's is pretty fast, and he managed to get it in. Alexander managed to get it in their first turn into my deployment zone, essentially, because it just managed to tank loads of hits from my reactions and everything like that. So lucky dice on Alexander's part, bad dice on my part, and when it came to my turn, basically it had a line of sight to a lot of my stuff that if I activated,
I get annihilated.
yeah, by something with either a giant flamethrower that you can't get out of the way of if you shoot, or a heavy machine gun. So then it took a lot of me doing sort of very cautious movements and doing things to get to where it needed to be. So it was a hard game, and I won it, but I won in the last turn by pipping off the last few things that I needed to get to the middle. And it was the mission was the board was split into 3 bands, and you basically had to own the most bands. It's good.
Very cool. All right, all done for recent game.
Yeah.
In that case, let's get fired into our main topic.
Let's do it.
Like you say, we're going full clickbait, full spectrum. Getting as many clicks as we can here by talking basically all about Games Workshop. But I think it's something that we've sort of I have these conversations all the time about GW and what they've done. And it's maybe good to spend a bit more time on it in a bit more depth. Because they're obviously such a dominant force in the gaming and miniatures hobby. And wanted to talk a bit about what that means, the impact that it has on the hobby, on other companies, on the whole, let's call it wargaming ecosphere.
Yeah.
And this isn't about saying that, something they've done last week is brilliant or terrible and it confirms our biases about them as a company, because that's what our silly segment, good GW, bad GW, that we normally have is for. But we want to take a bit of a baggy, wide lens look at what it means when one single company in an industry is a venerable 800-pound gorilla, or, even a bigger, older gorilla than that. And I think to make some wild guesses, or not so wild guesses, about where we think GW are going and how that impacts on the hobby as well. Quick disclaimer, we don't have any inside knowledge. No. We are not business or financial experts. So this is just all our brain farts formed over quite a lot of years and quite a lot of time paying attention, possibly too much. Who knows? We'll talk about it to what GW do. Before we get into it, should we ground this in what our experiences and perceptions of GW are? Daryl, do you want to shoot first?
Yeah. So I think my experience with GW is probably how a lot of experiences went, which was it was my first gaming love in terms of miniature games. And still...
Did you know there was anything else when you first got into GW stuff?
I was aware that there was old blokes that played with lead miniatures of Napoleonic folk in a church hall somewhere because I had seen it on films or TV or whatever, but I didn't know, if it was even a real thing or if it was just a concept or whatever. But in terms of miniatures, the only thing that I knew about was GW and their various streams of games. And I think just still a lot of people, it still holds a large part of my heart in terms of hobby, because the world that they've built in in all of the old world and the 40k universe, the heresy, even Age of Sigmar, there's still a lot of good, solid fantasy stuff comes out of Sigmar. They've got good stuff. And I've got a lot of fun memories of playing Warhammer with my friends, and they make amazing miniatures and things. But I think experience-wise, my love and my distaste sort of meters have definitely done a bit of that over the last sort of 4 to 5 years.
Okay.
And a lot, well, maybe a bit more, but a lot of it is based on how they handle balancing in games, fairly predatory business models, which tend to rely on you having to buy the good thing or you can't play games, which leads to a lot of negative experiences in gaming, and that nobody wants to have their free time that they probably don't have that much of. Probably don't have that much of. Being ruined by I just wanted to play with my stuff that I've painted and I've bought and I think's cool, and that person's got the better stuff, so I might lose at day one.
Was there, and so felt more negative about them over time,
absolutely.
And is there like any one sort of like road to Damascus moment where you're like, screw these guys, or has it just been a general sort of like, bits and bobs of things happening? And
it really ruined GW for me. I think shutting off the old world pissed us off, because the old world is like my one true love in terms of their things. I've always been more fantasy than sci-fi orientated anyways, but I think shutting down the old world with all of the characters that I loved, Malice Darkblade and Gotrek and Felix are like my two favourite book collections from...
have you read any of the Gotrek stuff because he's in Age of Sigmar?
More Realms, no.
He's still slaying.
Yeah, no, I haven't. I've read some decent Mortal Realms stuff, but it's just not the same to me. Mm-hmm. It's not the same, and the world that the old world was just, it still had a bit of relatability, and they're not like jumping through
low fantasy.
They're not jumping through teleporters into worlds that have got floating lava rocks, and then the next one it's a gravesand everywhere and different dimensions, and in this world all the birds have got skulls instead of heads, and you're just like, I know you wanted a bit of expressive and creative freedom, but like just
ground it somewhere.
Just chill out.
Yeah, I like a bit of grounding.
But so that was a little bit of a thing, but I could have even got on with that. But definitely, I am at heart, I am somebody that likes to be able to play a fair competitive game, and 8th was just, for Codex creep, was just bizarre. It was absolutely insane. It was always a case of a Codex gets released and the faction, apart from maybe one or two factions, it was just that faction was insane, unbeatable, ridiculously high win rates. Everyone was just going out and spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on all new armies just to try and stay current. And 9th was very much the same. And 10th, the did the same thing with balancing in that, and it's meant to be better now, but I don't trust a thing that they say on that meta watch thing. I really don't trust a thing that they say on it. We were chatting about that on the Discord earlier, actually, about they put a meta watch out for AOS today, and everything is within that Goldilocks zone of 55 to 45, and it's not. If you look at Honest Wargamer, who is a big head in Age of Sigmar,
and also used to work at GW and used to run events,
and now does fantasy stuff as well. His statistics are very different.
Is other than that,
and it's thorough. So I think just things like new codexes or card packs. Buying books that are out of date before they've even arrived, card packs that are irrelevant because you buy the Space Marine card packs at the start of 10th, but then actually you're not allowed to use 100 of those 140 cards anymore because they're all going to Legends and blah blah blah. It feels like they're very, and for somebody with such a high profit margin now, it just feels like they're still going buy this, and it's a company. I know it is, but like, it's a company that's messing with the things that I love instead of it's not a utility, you know what I mean?
I mean, we'll get into this because like one of the things that I think one of the points I want to make is that it sometimes feels like they've got a lot of our childhood memories or nostalgia held at ransom kind of thing, you know, and like you want to still be able to interact with that, but you have to go through these various barriers and paywalls and things in order to do it.
Prime example of that. I complain about GW all the time, but I mean, you can see a hot three quarters of what's on my shelf is GW, and I still buy it, and I'll complain about buying it.
But let's unpack that a bit.
Stockholm syndrome.
So for me, I asked, did you know that there was anything else? Because I didn't know that there was anything else. I mean, definitely not when I was a kid, and I almost got into GW stuff. So I had White Dwarf magazines, and I had some miniatures which were horrendously painted. I think I got quite close to playing my mate's Blood Bowl. I think he had like the first edition one with the polystyrene pitch, which was pretty cool really now. But never got anywhere close to playing a game. And I guess it's a bit of a sliding doors thing because you're slagging off 8th. I had rebought Blood Bowl as an adult with some sort of intention of getting back into it. I'd went into a GW shop, thinking about maybe getting into fantasy, they just said that they'd blown that up and it didn't exist anymore. And it was when the 8th edition starter set came out and there was some Space Marines in it, and I was like, all right, let's go. And I had a friend at work, Ben actually, who's I'll be playing again soon.
Was that Indomitus?
No, it wasn't Indomitus. It was the one with it's Death Guard on one side. What was it?
Yes, yeah, I know. I can remember. I can't remember the name of the box, but
I want to say Plague Wars or whatever, but it wasn't. What the hell was it called? Maybe it was Indomitus.
No, because Indomitus was
9th.
Yeah, that was 9th with the Necrons.
Yeah. I should know. Anyway, whatever it was called, I got that. And I had a few games of 8th. And for me at that point, never having really played any sort of like, actual war games, I was like, this is amazing. I got a little bit half decent at paint. I was like, this is amazing. So it was all like fresh and new to me at that point. And I think like you say, like all these sort of business practices and things that we're going to talk about, you start to like notice those over time. During 8th, I didn't like, I was playing Space Marines and I've got a codex. This is class. When the second codex came out, like about 7 months before they brought out the new edition, and then they had another codex again. That was the first time when I was like, oh, what's going on here? This is a bit weird. But yeah, so like for the longest time I didn't realize there was any alternative. Obviously now we both go to like a wargaming club, and we're lucky enough that there's a real panoply of games getting played there, so you can play almost anything you could sort of imagine. You'll probably find somebody to play a game with. So like really lucky from that point of view. But it was, I only ever played GW stuff, and mostly I still do. I'm probably at the point now where I'm like enjoying other games and other aesthetics but like that thing that you say about like them having this hold over your sort of emotions, and like nobody else has built a world up which sort of kind of started in 1975 and still exists, or well the company started in 1975, the idea of Warhammer in the early 80s. It
goes back to that analogy though, doesn't it? Like I keep making, it's a shit analogy, but it's still the one that I stick by. It's like I feel like it because it's so big and it's just so in your face every time. The first thing that you look at, if you look at miniatures online or whatever, or miniatures paint ranges or painting guides or YouTubers, because of the amount of money that I spend on it. It's just always GW, and it's like thinking that McDonald's is the best burger in the world, but it's because it's all you've ever known, and there's just so many places that do so many cool other things that would be really exciting to you, but you've just had this big consumerist like overload, like just pushing all of these products in your face, and it's a shame. Well, I think one of the biggest shames is other than the fact that they've ruined a lot of the stuff that they had that was good, is that you end up missing out on some other cool stuff. There's a lot of folk that are like almost like, oh well, no, this is just a game system that I want to play now because it's the only one that, or I don't have space for a second game system or whatever, and then they'll never actually try another game system because it's just they've defaulted to that one because it's the normal first stop, isn't it?
I think there's understandable reasons for that. But it is. It's a sort of a self-perpetuating thing. So we're going to do a little bit of scene setting. I did a little bit of research.
You did, yeah. I was very impressed. Yeah.
So we're talking about how big of a company they are. So GW's market cap currently is £3.13 billion. So I think they're not in the FTSE 100. I think they're in the FTSE 250. But just as a comparison and to give some sense of scale. So like they're not just a big company in wargaming, they're big full stop. So Marks and Spencer is a bit bigger at 4.62 billion. WH Smith is about half the size at 1.63, and Witherspoon's has got some way to go to be as successful as GW at just under £1 billion. So long story short, GW has a Primaris sized market cap.
It does,
So there you go. And within the wargaming industry, so like last year, Hornby bought a quarter of Warlord Games, run by ex-GW people, John Stallard being one of them, for $1.25 million. So that, in theory, values that company at $5 million. So you could have 626 Warlord Games for one GW. And Fantasy Flight, who published Star Wars Legion, had a revenue in 2023 of 7.5 million. GW's was 470 million, so 62 times larger. I think Fantasy Flight, it gets complicated because they're owned, I want to say, by Asmodee.
Asmodee, yeah.
And then Asmodee are owned, I think it goes back to Saudi Arabia eventually. But anyway, as a standalone company, GW are just massive, and they dwarf all the direct competition. And you were talking about McDonald's. I've said here that it's as if McDonald's only had to compete with, you know, small regional chains of takeaways.
Yeah.
And so like, what does this mean for the hobby? And what kind of company is GW? We've got a few talking points here.
Yeah.
And we'll pick up some of them and just like you know, like let the conversation go as well. But like one thing that I wanted to say is that, like, you know, and we've already done it all the way through here of talking about GW as this one singular thing, but like GW is not one thing. It's a massive company. It's a bunch of people, and there's lots of different departments between you know, involved in it. Some making good decisions some of the time, some making bad decisions some of the time. But I think that we all like, or we get sucked into talking about and thinking about GW as one thing. You know, GW did this, GW messed up that, and this, like, so it's this idea of them being, you know,
a sole entity.
A sole entity, a sort of like an overlord, you know, a kind of
James.
Like, you know, we don't get to sort of see behind the curtain much, and so, you know, this then leads to, you know, the discourse miniatures of this world, or people who will have YouTube channels just saying how awful GW is, as if they've deliberately made all these terrible decisions. And undoubtedly, sometimes they will have done, or at least they're not willing to change something. You know, we've talked about codex creep already. But yeah, there's this thing, isn't there, called Hanlon's razor, which is never attribute something to malice, which can be explained by stupidity. And I'm not saying GW or people at GW are stupid, but I just think there's an awful lot of the things which we like to get annoyed about sometimes, which are to do with the fact that they have a separate, you know, miniature design department and to the rules department, and, you know, evidently sometimes those things aren't working in tandem. We've talked about Cursed City. Peachy, ex-employee of GW, has said that a lot of the kerfuffle about the Cursed City expansions was to do with you know, books not being able to get over from China in time, and they needed to have miniatures to release to become the Soulblight Gravelords. So actually what happened was a lot of the expansions that were planned for Cursed City and the miniatures in them were pushed into and became boxes of like Soulblight Gravelords. But GW never said anything about that. So people come up with wild conspiracy theories about how they've deliberately tried to screw us all over, or whatever. So
it's weird though, isn't it? Because when you sort of think about it as a business decision, like, they don't have to tell people things like that, do they?
Don't have to, probably don't want to for the stock price sometimes. But
this sort of this humanization of large entities also is not unique to Games Workshop, by the way. You know, it happens very widely in entertainment and media as well, doesn't it? So if you think about, my fiance plays a lot of Diablo, and Blizzard, the company, just like they do World of Warcraft, you know, if something bad happens in World of Warcraft, it's like Blizzard ruined it. Blizzard is an enormous, you know, company with all of these different studios working underneath it, and all of these different departments within those studios, and it's somebody's messed up. But, you know, it becomes Blizzard, League of Legends, it's Riot. Riot, fix this. Riot, why have you done this? Blah, blah, blah. You know, it's always a...
No, I agree. I was just gonna wonder out loud. Do you think there's something to do with like games and gaming, where, you know, we're so involved in, you know, in imaginatively taking part in the world that somebody else has created, that like when things go wrong, the fourth wall comes down, and you're like, and it's particularly annoying because your involvement is kind of like what the hell am I doing here?
How many football supporters will attribute everything that goes wrong in a football team to just the manager, it's definitely the manager's fault. It's got nothing to do with the team that are training the team, the players that are going out and getting mortal instead of doing what they're meant to do, or that
which we don't find out about because everyone's got non-disclosure agreements and so forth.
Exactly, and it's just that person, that manager or that owner or whoever, that is the problem. So I don't think it's unique to gaming.
No.
I think it's unique to things that people are passionate about.
Yeah.
So I think if you're really invested in something, you almost feel like you need to have someone to blame, don't you? You don't want to be like, you group of people that are working at various levels have disappointed us in different ways, but I want you to know as a whole, it's like, James, pack it in, come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's my perception anyway.
No, I think it's absolutely right. Like, yeah, so there, there we go. We've sort of solved capitalism, haven't we? Like, we need to stop personifying and like, humanizing these massive organizations,
corporations,
which produce cool things which we want to buy into. But yeah, that takes us to the second point, which is that so many of the ways in which whoever it is making the decisions at GW, they do want us to think of them as one thing. They want to like put forward this like one brand. They want us to buy into this world, this thing of Warhammer, which they've created now, and they've branded everything as Warhammer, and this works in sort of like in lots of sort of like different. It diffuses through in lots of different and kind of interesting ways, which some of which I've written down here, and a lot of which are just kind of a shame, I think, because I have looked back recently at some really old white dwarfs that I got hold of, and some old army books and some old codexes, and it tells you at the front who wrote it. So like I got an orc codex, orc army book, and it's got stories by Bill King, and it says they're by Bill King. Or Nigel Stillman, and the rules are by Rick Priestley or whoever it was. And yeah, it's a. I mean, a lot of people say this, but it's a real shame that they don't credit artists and writers in codexes or online or basically anywhere else. Everything's by the GW Design Studio.
It's very dystopian, isn't it? I've just realised talking about it. It's almost like, I don't know if you're a Star Trek fan, but like the Borg, like they just want to be this single entity with multiple, or in Infinity, there's something very similar called Aleph or Aleph, which is one sentient AI super mind that controls lots of media and entertainment and all that kind of stuff.
And now it's called the GW Design Studio.
Yeah, that's very dystopian.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's a shame, though. I mean, I never went to Warhammer Fest last year. I know a lot of people that did, and some had a great time, and some spent a lot of time in queues. But yeah, they didn't have studio staff there. And I've heard various people say that, in years gone by, it would have been really normal for studio staff to basically be there with their portfolios. And you can like sit down for a minute. And I was talking to a friend. I had a game with a friend, Andy, the other night, and he was saying that he'd been back in the day to the GW shop in Middlesbrough at the time, and it just so happened that Jez Goodwin was there with his sketchbook of Elder Art, which sounds like the best story ever. Really, it's incredible. But like, obviously, those kind of I guess it probably sounds incredible because now it's unthinkable. It just doesn't seem that it would ever happen.
The Suggs from Rogue Hobbies had a section on one of her videos recently where she was talking about the same thing, where she was like, one of the things that I noticed about Warhammer Fest was that there wasn't these people, and she remembers being at events, old Warhammer Fests, when she used to work there, where she would just be sat painting, chatting to people when they were around, and she was a bit of a face that people would recognise from being on the...
Yeah, of course, she was doing...
was it Warhammer? Not the...
She started doing the tutorials on Warhammer Plus for the Masterclass.
Masterclass, that was it, yeah. So like, she's... I was pretty deep into the GW sort of family, wasn't she? And it does feel like, because those people are really responsible for, when we look at a codex or a picture or whatever, like the art that's went into it is what fuels the imaginative fire that we've got, isn't it?
We talked a bit about games previously and about like, you make up your own headcanon But like, it's amazing. It's a lovely thing to be able to have conversations. Like for me, I want to know about what it was, the influences that like somebody had when they made, when they were writing the lore for Stirland or wherever in the old world, and like what sort of bits of Mittel Europa they were sort of thinking about when they came up with this stuff. You want to know about this sort of thing. And it just seems weird that you would have this massive resource of people who are writing this amazing stuff and creating all this like these fantastical worlds, and just to call it the GW Design Studio or Storyforge or whatever it is, and to kind of like not let you see how the sausage is made. I don't
dehumanize them to humanize themselves.
Yeah, really weird. And they rarely explain and almost never apologize. So we've talked about Curse City. There was a situation last year when Kill Team stuff was going immediately out of stock. Because, or presumably because, and people have said that they were printing gazillions of copies of Indomitus. And the thing is, when you don't tell people when something's gone wrong or how something works, and people get upset, is they'll make up their own crap about like why they think it is, and they'll tell each other, and
it's definitely because of this. It's and it just takes one person with a platform that has a reasonable number of listeners, and then
we've sort of talked a bit about like people seem to make like a career or like a side hustle at least out of like having YouTube channels where they do exactly that. So they want to talk with one corporate voice, but I just think that makes them way less interesting and less relatable as a company. And if something goes wrong, just say so.
And I know it's not possible. To do quite in the same way as smaller companies. But just at that point, as a shout out, I think one of the things that Parabellum do really well is, the people that are like responsible for designing the game and writing the rules and formulating the stories that go into it are like actively chatting to people in the Discord. Stavro, who is the lead creative designer for the game, came to the LGT and he was sat as I was playing a game in the LGT, chatting about some of his design choices, and I was asking him questions, and I was sweating a bit because he was there. But it's great that Leandros, the lead rules writer,
that makes it a memorable experience.
Totally,
right?
And the reason that I got into Parabellum, Conquest as hard as I did, was because of the fact that I remember I was playing a game, first proper game that I ever played, and Leandros was running a tournament in America at the time, and I asked a question on the Discord, and even though he was busy running a tournament, he still replied to us and clarified a rule. Like, that's just insane. And I know that's not possible for something that's as big as 40k or any of the games that they do. But I think they have the capacity to be more.
It feels like it could be, or they could just push more towards that, doesn't it? Like just to have more genuine interaction rather than just sticking up MetaWatch every month and sort of talking about
the people that were writing the rules for 10th. Why not just have like a little, a chat with them with a coffee and just go, this is where we're coming at. This is our design space. This is our mindset for going into, instead of just an article that is just like a the royal we as GW were thinking this. It just definitely feels better when there's people, isn't it? But
hey ho. So the next thing I wanted to mention was we've talked about how big of a company they are and how ridiculously oversized they are compared to all their competitors. And one sort of impact of that is that they have a massive gravitational pull for anybody that wants to work in the wargaming hobby industry, probably at all. And you see so many great designers, writers, artists, and content creators now, latterly, that have done stuff for GW and then go on to do their own thing or to go for work for other companies. We've mentioned Warlord already. Like Alessio Cavatori and people like that have gone on to do their own thing. And
Duncan, Peachy, Suggs.
all of the YouTubers have gone on to do their own thing, and you know, like, how much is Duncan's paint range worth now? It's insane. So you know, gone on to be like, you know, in instances like incredibly successful. So yeah, my question was: is GW then a company that nurtures talent or that constricts it? You know, should they get the credit for, you know, all these people coming through, and it's just a natural thing that, you know, people sort of want to do something else, or is it that people are leaving because they can't do what they want to?
But I think that's so. All of the chats that you see between these folk is always that they started to have experiences where they were, you know, they were getting their wrist slapped for trying to be more creative, or they were making business choices that these people disagreed with. And, you know, like Suggs was talking about the removal of faces from the painting videos, and it's just, you know, magic hands now. And like they're always very like, oh no, I really enjoyed my time, but it tends to always be caveated with, because of the people that I worked with, and everyone was really nice, and I made my best friend Peachy whilst I was there, and blah blah blah. But none of them are ever like, GW was the best place to work, and as a company they really cared for me, and the wages that they get paid are rubbish.
Yeah. So I don't have it in my brain, but like I remember reading about somebody who had been like a lead designer, or like a fairly high up designer on a couple.
There's somebody who wrote a codex. Oh no, somebody wrote the rules for either Age of Sigmar or Ninth, and they did not get something like 18 or 19 grand a year or something like that.
I vaguely remember it being a bit more than that, but like not a lot more than that. Basically like an office admin type of wage. You know, I think it was going a few years back, but yeah, it didn't seem like a lot for somebody who was creating the world, you know.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned this already a little bit, but their dominant position, you know, there's a kind of like you know, with friendly local gaming stores, if you want to have one, if you want to have a store, you've probably got to carry GW stock.
Well, yeah, so I mean,
or you just do.
Yeah, Kieran said like his first financial decision was like how do I stock GW, because you can't. I don't think you can beat a FLGS without stocking GW now.
And then my understanding is that you have to stock so much, or take certain products.
Yeah,
or
so
like
you have to be able to essentially spend a certain amount per month, which.
And every like game store has only got so much shelf space. So like if you're stocking GW stuff, what stuff are you not stocking? What stuff are you not able to then push? What stuff are you then not able to have like games nights of? And this is where we're sort of like veering a little bit into just like hearsay. But you do hear a lot of stories of, particularly around like things like products not being provided to game stores for pre-order now, and like GW wanting to push things through their own website.
Yeah.
So like some of these sort of business practices that you're talking about, it does feel like they are, again, whether by malice or whether by just like they don't have enough product, or they don't have enough of the product they want, and it's just a natural impact of that. You do seem to have these situations where it looks like they're taking advantage of their dominant position to squeeze other things out. Yeah.
Well, there's another shop near us, isn't there? And I remember talking to them about Conquest initially, and basically the answer was no, because that'll take up shelf space that I could put GW stuff on, and GW pays the bills. Yeah.
So it is this self-perpetuating
of course,
thing.
Yeah. Which it's sad, isn't it? But it's. I think it's not. I think it's probably more unique to our experience, or maybe just a UK thing as well, because I think in places like America, or places where shop space and things isn't as expensive to have. Yeah. You know, if you get. I went down to a place called ProTech Games recently, actually, in Middlesbrough, and the venue's great, but it's basically an industrial unit. And he has, like, everything every game system. He even had some Monster Apocalypse stuff, and that's the only place I've ever seen stock Monster Apocalypse.
Cool. But you need a massive store to do.
Yeah, and I mean it is. It's literally like, I mean, he's got like ladders to get to the top shelves. You know, it's proper.
How do you carry that much stock? Is it way busy?
I mean,
We'll have him on sometime.
Yeah. There's definitely. I mean, there's definitely stuff happening there very frequently. But I wouldn't say it wasn't like, you know, I wasn't fighting to get a table or anything like that. But yeah, it's definitely I think it almost becomes a prerequisite if that you're ever considering having a store or running a gaming space. GW has to be your main focus, and then you try and fit other stuff in. I mean, big shout out to Kieran, actually, because Kieran, although he does obviously carry GW stuff, he has went out of his way to stock Conquest stuff for us whenever we want it, and Star Wars Shatterpoint, and lots of small games with what space he can. And even if he can't, he'll get from his supplier, like the distributor, he'll do pre-orders for you, and it won't be sat on a shelf for you to go and pick up, but it'll be there within a day or two, which is really appreciated.
That's an interesting thing, and that's worth saying probably as well. Is it just because something's not on a shelf at whatever store you happen to be looking in, by all means, like, speak to the owners, and yeah, and if they've got like trade accounts with somebody that's doing something, then you can get it that way. So it doesn't have to be on a shelf, but
it's nice to look as well.
It's nice to see things as well, isn't it? So we've mentioned this already. A lot of people only play or have only ever played GW games. Definitely, that was me. Like not until fairly recently. And so what does that mean? Like, I'll be like devil's advocate here. And again, this is just another one of these self-perpetuating things.
Yeah.
But like, if I always want to be able to get a game, and I'm not in the privileged position that like we are of having a gaming club where lots of different stuff gets played, then if I play 40k, I'm probably going to be able to get a game wherever. So what I don't know, what do you think sort of like breaks that up? And like you've got an experience of like, you know, setting up like Conquest, like a Conquest group, and like, but other than just like a lot of effort and a lot of like, you know, like really pushing, like how do you see that sort of like changing in an area, or like, you know, I don't know, like how do you push people not away from GW stuff, but just like.
So I don't think the right thing to do is try and push someone away from GW. I think that and a lot of the people that are in a similar position to me that are, it's called Vanguard or Parabellum, that try and set up communities, you'll hear them say, people are just really interested in this and they don't want to hear why I'm saying this is better than this. It's the wrong approach. I mean, I know I do it sometimes, but mostly in jest. But I think telling someone, don't play that, play this instead,
it's never going to
will never work. But the reality,
nor should it, you know, it's not.
Absolutely not. Yeah. And the reality of it all is that actually it's just going to take a shitload of sort of time and finding a gaming group. And not everywhere is going to have a club like ours, but everywhere will have clubs or a store or something where there'll be somebody that plays something other than GW. It might not be the game that you play, but at least you know that it's there. And then the fact of the matter is, sometimes with smaller games and things, you might just have to buy it and go down and see if anybody wants to try it.
Yeah,
that's it. Or, you know, there's the advent of TTS at the minute, isn't there? You know, well, for the last couple of years, you'll probably be able to get a game of it on TTS to see if you like it. And then if you do, you can think about investing and then teaching other people. But just like, you know, just like board games, you know, like not everyone just plays one board game. It's not like, we all play, I don't know, Risk, and that's the only board game that we play, or Wingspan. Let's say I play Wingspan, you play Wingspan, but we all play other stuff. It's because there's loads of variety and loads of it is really entertaining, but there's not that big monopoly company that just pushes their product. So it's sometimes just about being a bit enticing and going, oh, look at these guys, and putting that big T-Rex model on the side of the table and getting people to walk over.
Yeah, a game needs to really have a pool, probably, doesn't it? Yeah, I imagine that's something that anybody who, for whatever reason, is starting to think about designing a game or some miniatures or a system, whatever it is, that's going to have to be a big part of a decision making. Is like, what is it? What's what's the spirit animal of this game? What is the thing that is going to like attract people to this? And
when they're walking past the table, they'll stop and go, "Oh, what's
cool
this?"
Thing? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, another point. I've said here that GW has an uneasy relationship with their own history and heritage, and there's a couple of things I wanted to mention here. There's one recently. So, Brian Ansell, a legendary figure within the whole industry, really, who I think a lot of people credit him with making, some hard-headed business decisions and sort of almost creating the idea of Warhammer. And he was a managing director of a company at a sort of like pivotal period in time. So he passed away pretty recently.
So 3 weeks ago or something like that?
I think it was in January, late December or January. And this was noted in all sorts of places. Like I think I first read about it in some sort of PC gaming magazine, and like in the local Nottingham press, and John Stallard, I think, at Warlord Games wrote a bit about him, and all over social media, all sorts of people,
groups, and
anyone that had anything to do with GW or wargaming really were mentioning this. But GW themselves, and I'll stand corrected if I'm wrong, but I don't think they like even mentioned this.
No,
which is really weird.
Yeah,
and you sort of think like, God, if John Blanche passes away, are they going to mention that or something? So I guess, it just seems where they are now as a company, and I've noticed it as well here that people like John Blanche, art director and creator of the whole aesthetic really of Warhammer and GW over the last sort of like 20 odd 30 years. Yeah. He's recently left, retired. Jervis Johnson retired not that long ago, another absolute stalwart. So I'm wondering are they at a point where these like sort of almost legendary figures aren't at the company anymore? Then does the company have a memory of itself, and how does that work?
Has it lost its 80s GW soul?
80s, 90s, yeah. I don't know.
All the old guard are gone. I don't know. Yeah, well, I think that kind of fits with the the mega corp sort of faceless board of directors. Like a shaded room with shadow down to here on everybody that's there, so you don't actually know who's there. And it's just GW. But yeah, it feels like a big oof to me for them to have done that.
Yeah,
like to have not recognize somebody that had such a pivotal role.
Again, I'm going back to the thing of like, don't assume malice where like stupidity is a possibility.
I don't believe that a company that big with that many people would not have seen something and went, actually
we should. Somebody evidently has made a decision not.
Or John Blanche rings and goes, "Oh, by the way, did you notice Wapal died? Should we just even though I'm not working there anymore, he must have a bit of sway still, or at least have somebody's phone number." Yeah.
So that was an odd one, and I think like this thing about it, bringing up the history and the heritage of the company as well is interesting at the moment, because so many of the releases seem to be like catnip for people who have been in and around the company for ages. So we've had new Terminators come out, which look amazing. The Old World, which seems to have done brilliantly.
Does it though? Like, does it? So we were chatting about this in the Discord the other day, and it felt like it was just like a big flash in the pan and then disappeared to me. Like, but I don't know if that's just my algorithm.
Yeah.
So I could definitely be a victim of the algorithm.
Yeah.
I had loads of battle reports,
right? Okay.
Loads of painting videos, everything coming up, and it just kind of seems to have like petered out. And even people talking about it on like painting groups and things, it just seems to have. But again,
there's an amazing guy on YouTube called Dr. Luke Blackstone, and he is an actual doctor, and I think he's a sort of a royal, not a royal correspondent, but he's somebody who has commented on the royal family at various times, and he's I don't know where he's a doctor, but some university. Also, he loves Warhammer: The Old World, and so he's been chatting about it a lot. I think like so the rules seem to have been well received. A good amount of people are playing it. I guess it's hard to judge because firstly, you don't know how many copies they printed of these things. It definitely sold out in like a nanosecond.
Yeah.
But like
was that
que sera,
because-
sera, you know,
was this a
Yeah.
kill team thing where it's sold out because it didn't make enough of the stuff? Or
Absolutely. You just don't know. But like, I guess my back to my point though is that like between that and like, you know, Beaky's coming out and getting redone for the Heresy, and like so much of what they produce is like a better version of something that was a childhood memory for you. So I just feel like there's an interesting contrast between, you know, putting out all this stuff which is about nostalgia,
yeah,
at a point when possibly the company is sort of like not acknowledging, you know, like important things to do with its own history.
yeah.
And I was wondering again, like, we've talked about this a bit, but like, is that why? And a lot of the things that we've said have been pretty negative here, but like, is that why people often feel so negative about GW? Is that they are, you know, the custodians of a lot of our like sort of fond memories, and it doesn't feel like they're taking proper care of them?
Yeah, probably. Actually, I think there's probably a big element of that.
Yeah.
Because if we're really honest about it, we are really invested in it. Like, we are mega. How much time do we spend talking about it? I mean, I'm 36, 37-year-old bloke, and you're not
Bit
far off
older,
that either
bit
way.
older.
But you know, we're here on a Thursday night, like you say, after putting kids down, sorting out the household and stuff, to talk about it.
Yeah.
And we spend our Friday nights, and maybe sometimes other nights if we're lucky, doing it every week. And it's, you know,
I've just taken back off you from a land the book Dice Men. Again, I'm mentioning John Stallard at Warlord because him and I forget the other guy's name. They've recently written a book about their sort of memories of GW. So
Okay.
there's a lot of chat. There's the YouTube channel, which is absolutely brilliant. Jordan Sorcery, who is interviewing lots of these sort of like, you know, big characters from the history. And we're almost at a point, it seems, where like the lore of the inner workings of this company is at a level where it almost rivals the actual stories of these, you know, fantastical worlds that they've created. You know, there's this sort of like, oh well, who designed that dragon? Oh, that was Trish somebody or other, and oh, but now she's not in the company because such and such happened, and you know, there's these like strange twists and turns of this corporate organization, which, like you say, we're sort of like. It's like a soap opera in itself. It's got its own narrative. It's a weird thing.
And you'll never catch me watching Coronation Street. So I've got to have my. This is where I get my tea. Yeah, this is where I get my tea.
Boy, so
no.
This is it. This is the thing that you sort of like get to whinge about.
It is, absolutely. That and medicine, yeah.
Hooray! Okay, so let's start wrapping up by thinking about where GW is going in the future. And so I know something that you're involved in doing a lot of is 3D printing, and so. Yeah, do you ever see that being a sort of existential threat, or do you see that being something that GW will even have to, you know, adapt to the existence of?
So I think it's going to basically take over how models are produced.
Right.
Essentially, GW already used 3D printing for all of their masters and everything anyways, because there was the whole debacle about, remember when the Lion got released, and they had done his master model. They had obviously 3D printed it, painted it, and the art that released it, you could see layer lines on his shoulder pads and things.
Yep. I don't think that's anything new. I think that when they used to produce them at like sort of 3 times the size or whatever, I think they 3D print their stuff before it gets, you know, before you send it to a massive plastic manufacturing process.
Exactly, but now I think with things like what's it called?
Seocast?
No, but that's for smaller companies. Like not print on demand. What's it called? Like the you know, when you get they bring back something for a short amount of time, made to order. Yeah, so you know they've got all this made to order stuff with back catalog stuff which people want, but they can't justify running the forges all the time to have them kicking out. And I don't know if you've seen, but Steamforged Games have sort of revitalized. They've sort of jumped in the grave of the Guild Ball community project. Now that Guild Ball was sort of making a bit of a resurgence, and they're backing it now. And the thing that they've done is they don't have the machines making the models anymore, but they have access to a large number of printers that make models, or did deals with companies or whatever, and now they do a print on demand service. So you can just say, these models which are out of print, I want them, and you pay for 40 quid and you get the box of models now.
And is this coming from
Steam Forged,
a 3D printer?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
okay. Because you were mentioning My Mini Factory before, and they have, is it only models or something like that? They've got a print on demand
service. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So, but obviously Steam Forged are keeping that close to their chest because they don't want other people printing their stuff. Yeah. Interestingly, though, good guy Steam Forged, which you'll not hear us say very often, actually, because they've had some pretty bad business choices in terms of Kickstarters and things. They released the full starter set, which was a boxed game called Kickoff.
Right.
So it's two full teams, terrain, tokens, and everything. They've released the STLs for it for free. So you can just, if you've got someone that's got a printer, you can print 2 teams and terrain and everything that you need to play the game. Rules are free online and everything, so definitely try it out if anybody wants to try it out. But yeah, I think 3D printing will impact 40 Games Workshop in terms of IP infringement a lot, because it's becoming now 3D printed armies are now everywhere, absolutely everywhere. Some of them look close to but aren't exactly, and then there's the folk that are making straight copies. But whether or not it'll completely change the face of the business for them, I'm not sure.
Yeah. Do you think people will ever... Do you think that some people who are engaging with buying stuff off GW are, looking for that instant fix that you get when you go shopping, and that is not something that you get when you download an STL, make a plan to print it, get the resin, print it, cure it.
So the thing is, so you were looking at my 3D printed God army before, so I could print 40 Guardsmen in about 2 hours.
Yeah.
So by the time I've drove to town and went to the GW shop and then came back, I would have done it already anyways. But
do you get that dopamine hit that you get when you buy something from a person, or are you immune to this? Or
no, I'm the opposite. That's why look around you. There's unopened packages everywhere because I just like buying stuff.
Yeah,
but. Yeah, also you can buy. So the STLs for my Guardsmen weren't just free; they were from a company that had did a good job of sculpting them, and I can't remember what they're called, but the models are called Valor Corps. If you want to look them up, good job supporting them and all that kind of stuff. So it's just a case of I spent 90 quid on STLs, but for a full range essentially.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't think my own view is, and don't have a 3D printer, is that it's just not never gonna replace it, and I don't see people buying. I don't see a lot of consumers buying 3D printers as relatively straightforward and getting easier to use over time as they are. But yeah, it's something that's going to supplement it, isn't it? If you're either going to print more stuff and have more miniatures.
Yeah.
It doesn't give you any more time to paint anything.
No, it doesn't. If anything, it's worse because it's so easy to just print an army.
Yeah.
You end up with just more stuff.
Snowed under. All right. And so, I guess the other thing, the big thing on the ticket is for the future of GW is the Amazon deal. They're going to be producing films and or telly shows. So I guess, firstly, have you got any sort of things that you definitely want them to make? But secondly, where could this see the company going? I've heard some people sort of say that this could almost be the point of them, not being a miniatures company anymore and being just part of an entertainment company.
I think they would like that. I think it's going to potentially blow the doors wide open in terms of exposure and acceptance of it as a... one of the things that used to always really wind me up is what's it called again? Henry Cavill. I don't know if you ever saw, but he would go on onto TV shows and they would be talking about what he likes to do and blah blah blah. And they would always bring up the fact that he likes to do Warhammer.
Warhammer.
And then they would almost sort of ridicule him for a short amount of time for you're a grown man painting little toy models and things like that and blah blah blah. and I think this is probably going to be one of those things where it happens and people are like, God, actually, these stories are really cool and really interesting, and I can get involved in them. So I'll give you something that I'm drawing sort of semi-parallels with. There's a few big TV series came out that really made people that weren't into sci-fi and weren't into fantasy get into it.
Yeah.
Game of Thrones. So many people that watched Game of Thrones. I work in I used to work in nursing, and like this isn't me making sweeping statements or anything. This is my direct objective experience. Like, I work with over 100 people, and I could say probably about 10 of them would say, "Oh yeah, I would love to go and watch this fantasy film that was coming out," or like if the Lord of the Rings series was coming on Amazon, they would want to watch it. The rest of them would be like, "Nah, I'm not watching that. I'm not watching that." But Game of Thrones came out, and all of a sudden, zombies and dragons and this, it was all amazing, cool. That was unbelievable. Demons and magic and all that kind of stuff. And
not many of those people are playing Song of Ice and Fire, though, are they? Or...
No, but so I suppose that's not the point. It's not the. I don't think they're going to necessarily stop playing the miniatures, but they might start reading the books.
Yeah,
they might start playing the computer games,
The Witcher, or
exactly,
the next thing is.
Exactly. And I think, and The Expanse was the other one, and I think that did really well at just dragging people into sci-fi. And I think if they make a really good, high quality TV show or film that is engaging, regardless of the fact that it's got this completely unique universe, it will bring positive exposure to the world of 40k, 30k, whatever. I want them to do Eisenhorn.
Yeah, Eisenhorn. Anything, I think it just needs to be something that's sort of like human based.
Yeah.
Where, for whatever reason, a single solitary space marine turns up like in the last frame of the last, and people are like, "Whoa, what's that?
What is that?"
Yeah. So it needs to be something maybe in an underhive or somewhere.
So Eisenhorn, yeah.
Something definitely like human Imperial Guard shaped, or something Inquisitive. Gaunt's Ghost. Yeah. Lots of people have got their favourite stuff, but I mean, I'm super looking forward to it. When
the Warhammer crime stuff's actually pretty good. I've read a couple of the books now. Our friend Liam from the club, is a big fan, and he put us onto them. And I think there's a few of those that are. But it's almost just Blade Runner, isn't it? It's like that dystopian future, hive city, lots of very, very rich people and very, very poor people, and the disparity between, and that breeds those areas where cults begin. And cults are around now, so, just having a little bit of mutation and a little bit of evil warp magic is enough sci-fi to make it sci-fi, but still a bit believable.
Yeah, definitely. Well, as I say, I'm absolutely looking forward to seeing whatever we do end up going
Same,
with.
Yeah. So.
And summing up, any final thoughts? I have to say, like, I hadn't realised how sort of like negative about GW this was when I was writing it down. It's obviously like a load of pet peeves, but like
I thought I was relatively good today. That I was well behaved.
You've been like. Absolutely measured. But any sort of like final thoughts or like tying it all together? I just think it's I'll go back to the thing of it being so interesting that like a company that there's so many sort of like like sort of issues with, and it doesn't change the fact that they are responsible for, and they are the sort of custodians of these extraordinary worlds, which are probably like my favorite, as far as like intellectual property or like settings or whatever it goes. And so there is just that push me pull you thing of like, well, you just find ways to ignore some of the stuff that you don't like the sound of because they make these incredible universes that you can be part of.
Blind faith in Stockholm syndrome.
Yeah,
you got he'll be better next time.
Okay, that's the. I think that's the name of a podcast.
Yeah, he'll be better next time.
Anyway,
blind faith in Stockholm syndrome.
We'll go with that. Yeah. All right, enough of GW.
Yep.
We've done it. So secondary objectives. Just before we head off, something less tabletop related that we're excited about. and I think we might have gone for pretty similar things here. So, as we record this, I haven't been to see Dune 2 yet.
Nope.
I did watch Dune again at home the other night.
Good
to sort of
show.
like get myself back into where things are with it. But basically, my thing is being excited about going to the cinema. Because there's not many. Well, it's probably between like this and like Chris Nolan stuff, but like just when something comes out where it's like you're almost guaranteed it's going to be fantastic. You probably want to go and see it at the IMAX if you can. It's gonna be a great experience. And yeah, I was chatting again with my mate Ben, and you know, for all that like cinemas dying at some sort of death, there are like these few directors around who are putting out things which are so extraordinary.
But you
just know it's going to be fantastic, and
you're compelled
really
to see them in that spectacle of an enormous screen with enormous speakers. And yeah,
absolutely. So yeah, that's my thing. Haven't been yet. So I'm reviewing not having seen Dune 2, and I'm giving that 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10.
I'm loving the experience of not quite having seen it yet. How about you?
So I'll put the same down up June 2. Where I'm lucky actually, so my mother's agreed to come and babysit our poorly child tomorrow for a few hours, because we've got tickets booked for 12 o'clock tomorrow. So we're going to go and see that. I'm very excited about that. I haven't watched Dune to catch up, which I probably should have. It's been a little while since I saw the original. In fact, when it came out was when I saw the original, and I can't quite remember where it left off.
They're in the desert.
Yeah. So I can't quite remember where they've left off in terms of I know Thopter crash, the gaffer dies, and they haven't found any worms yet. Spoiler alert. But yeah, because it's split different. The OG film. The OG film tries to cram a lot in one go, doesn't it?
So I think these first two films are the first book split in half.
Right.
I think you'll be all right. I think I saw a quick interview with the director, and he was saying that they did a recap of sorts, because they wanted people, or I imagine the studio wanted people to be able to enjoy Dune 2 without necessarily having seen Dune 1 recently. But I guess having watched Dune 1 the other night, something to say, and this relates to like, you know, what on earth Games Workshop and Amazon are going to do with the thing that they put out. But it's an incredibly complex world and universe, Dune, and the film doesn't do an awful lot of like Basil exposition. It kind of just shows and doesn't tell. And I think it's a masterclass in just creating an atmosphere which is so compelling that you want to just know what's going on enough to not have to need everything explained to you. And that's what you need to do, Games Workshop. That's what you need to do with your 40k.
Totally. I think especially because language in it is so different, isn't it? Like, because they mix a load of different languages together. And I think for a novice to... So I actually asked my fiancée to read Eisenhorn or listen to the audiobook. I think one of the things that a lot of people get really sort of maybe get a bit frustrated about, or a bit, you know, turned off by, is that everything is different in terms of language. So it's not like the police. You know, you've got the RBTs, and then, you know, the Administratum, and then you've got servo skulls, and then people are just, if you've never seen a servo skull, you're like, what's a servo skull?
But in a telly show, you just have it. You just have it there.
Yeah.
You just have this, you know, and it doesn't matter what the gloves are called or what the bodysuit's called. It's just
so they have to do what they've done with Dune, don't they? Yeah, I'm really looking forward to that. But I'm also looking forward to, probably in a very different vein, spectacle. But in terms of silly spectacle, is a new Godzilla vs King Kong. I love kaiju movies. I've always loved kaiju movies, and I thought the last one was really good. So hopefully this one is also very entertaining.
All right, yeah, two different hot popcorn picks there.
Yeah.
Both sounding fantastic. So is that coming up the cinema as well?
Yeah, it's out soon. Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. Well, look, that's probably going to about do it for us, isn't it?
Certainly is.
So yeah, thank you so much, listener, for listening.
Thank you.
We're going to try and get back to about one a month for these.
Yeah.
And yeah, we were thinking for the next one of talking about games beyond the grave. So in other words, the pros and cons of playing dead games. So like some games come back from the dead, like Warhammer the Old World
Or
Guild Ball,
yeah.
which we played when it was a dead game. But so it's partly, I guess, also to do with the fact that we've been getting into War Master. But there's lots to talk about. You know, there's pros and cons of playing things which aren't going to change anymore in the future.
Yeah.
So that'll be for then. But for now, thank you very much, Daryl.
Thank you, Lee.
You have been excellent, and so have you, listener. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll catch you in the next one.
See you.
For